All right, we should be live, and yep, okay, and it looks like we have audio. I think we're good to go. So welcome everybody. Sorry, I think we're a couple minutes late, but getting started here with the program on international sales being broadcast from the Oregon Technology Business Center. And since we're well, quick summary of what OTBC is. We're an incubator for startup companies in Beaverton, Oregon, and provide a lot of mentoring, office space, and so forth. So if that's something that would be of interest to you, we'd certainly love to talk to you more about how OTBC might be able to help your startup. Find out more at otbc.org. And with that, I would like to turn the floor over to Tom DiCorcia, and while Tom maybe does a quick intro of himself, I will bring up his slide deck and we'll get started. So, Tom.
Great, thank you, Steve. And my name is Tom DiCorcia, or DiCorcia. We were just discussing that. I've lived in Oregon for about 10 years now. In that time, I've been with the state of Oregon, with the Oregon Business Development Department, and we're also go by the name of Business Oregon, and we're state agency charged with business development in general. One function in there is global business export promotion, and that's the section I'm in. And let's see, I've come to Oregon from Japan, is where I lived previous to that. I managed business, Asia Pacific business for Arbortext, which is a company, a software company based in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I was Norwest Venture Capital funded. I was about the 100th employee, and we had an office in Europe, one person and one person in Asia. That was me. So it was software, publishing software based on originally SGML, Structured Generalized Markup Language, and then XML. Arbortext is one of the original submitters of the XML standard to the W3C. And we did documentation in structured text for aircraft, automobile companies, Caterpillar, pharmaceutical companies, anyone who uses large collections of documents where Microsoft Word doesn't usually work that well, although people have made it work pretty well. So came back to the US and joined Arbortext actually in Ann Arbor for a while as an industry marketing person involved with marketing to the pharmaceutical industry for a while. A lot of documents in pharmaceutical industry, be it drug submissions or labeling, what they call labeling, the label that comes with the drug. That's actually a big thing. There has to be a number of different languages. They have to keep records of problems that occur there. So being a documentation company, Arbortext went international early because a lot of their customers were global companies like Sun Microsystems.
I'm in the right place?
Yep.
All right.
And they had to do their documentation in different languages. So we had the capability to do multiple languages in our software early on. That is why they had the office in Asia and the office in Europe. And we began to pick up customers overseas, as well as just handling the needs of our multinational clients here in the US. Just as an aside, the documentation system that Caterpillar had, that is a global company, used machine translation back in the 1990s even. They're putting together that system where they would have components of their documentation written in something called simplified English. And from that simplified English, a special Caterpillar version, the machine translation was fine-tuned such that you can do repair manuals in a dozen different languages pretty much automatically without a little check needed. And when they did their documentation and components, that was an easy way to maintain a large collection of documentation in a number of different languages. But the point is that overseas, big business for Caterpillar, of course for all large companies. Small companies often do incidental business overseas. Startups look overseas traditionally only after the IPO. You know, the US is their first market, early adopters, developed a business there. Then after they got the IPO, the funding, they'd start looking overseas. Arbortext was kind of global before the IPO. Actually, it was purchased by Parametric Technology. We didn't do an IPO, but before the exit, because of our customers were international. But our venture capitalists told us that having a few foreign customers was a good thing for the exit. U.S. Still the largest economy in the world, but its share of the world pie of business is shrinking. The rest of the world is getting bigger relative to the U.S. And you may tend to think nowadays that if you're on the internet, you're global. And you are, and you can be accessed globally. But still, we're one of many hundreds of countries worldwide, each with their own laws, cultures, languages, regulations. And you have to make sure that you're complying with those laws, at least, so you don't get into any trouble. On the other hand, if you want to fully, and also if you want to take advantage of those markets fully, you should be prepared to do business in the way that they're used to doing business. Great if you got a product that everybody will overcome a lot of obstacles to buy and pay cash to you, but that's probably you're not taking advantage of the best, the most opportunity that you could. We'll visit smaller companies in Oregon who are very proud of their product, and they'll say we only deal with cash in advance. And that is not a bad way to do business if you can. It reduces a lot of the risk of getting paid, which is one of the issues we could talk about. But imagine how much more business they would do if they offered credit terms, and there are ways to do that safely.
So I think we have the slides up here, and
yeah.
Just so you know, we are doing a Google Hangout stream on this too, but feel free, local audience, to ask questions and
go to the next slide.
And I think you just do the
right.
Click the next there. You should.
Probably have to do it.
Oops. Okay,
We're
at least
down
I
now?
thought. Okay, let's see if I can figure out the technology here. Maybe. Okay, did I actually grab us the wrong window here? So I need to be here. Ah,
Oh, here we go.
there we go. All right, let me just make this a little bit bigger, and then.
I hate it when presenters say that I need to change this slide, but this should be why trade matters to you rather than what it means to Oregon. But if you're curious about why the state of Oregon is involved in export promotion, so a lot of jobs in Oregon supported by international business. Most of them are at Intel, not most of them, but the more than any other company would say, Intel, Nike, maybe. In terms of export statistics, you'll see that semiconductors are the biggest export from Oregon. Agricultural products are up there, wood products are up there, but in terms of the industrial type products, Nike doesn't show up there on the exports because they're not exporting very much from Oregon. They're a global company, but most of their manufacturing is done overseas, and that's another way to do international business. And that's another aspect of international business is sourcing or doing business overseas. It's just that the state isn't promoting the sourcing because that tends to proceed very well on its own without help from the state. What we're trying to do is get the smaller companies to get products that are manufactured in Oregon or made or have significant value added in Oregon overseas to bring income back into the state. But we found that exporting companies, this is correlation perhaps more than cause and effect, although there's some cause and effect as well. Companies with international business pay their employees more. They're stronger companies. And in order to sell effectively overseas, you do have to have a pretty robust business system at home. You have to have good accounting systems. Your marketing should be under control. Your business, and that's why some companies were waiting for the IPO before they got started in international business. But once it's robust enough to go international, and in building up to make your business more robust internationally, you can help you domestically as well. You have to have your systems be a little bit more abstracted so that they can handle all different kinds of situations. And that's good for the business all around. More than 6,000 Oregon companies export. Out of how many, I don't know. We deal with what's called the traded sector as opposed to the non-traded sector. So your dry cleaning shop down the road is non-traded sector, And there are many more of those than traded sector companies in the state. And of course, you pretty much have to be a traded sector company before you can be considered, which means out-of-state business as well, inside the United States, before you start looking at exporting. And it could be products, hardware, or software, of course, or services like architectural services that are being exported. Those are exports. Other exports that you might not have thought of is when foreign students come here, go to U of O, considered an export. When a tourist comes here and spends their money from overseas, that's considered an export as well. And all of that's good for the balance of trade in the state. Export, about how much we export, $21 billion in 2014. It's a little bit smaller in 2013. It actually went down quite a bit during the recession of 2008, 7, 8, and then is coming back to normal and continuing its upward trajectory further. Talk about the top exports. See, the categories, if you go in and look at your commodity number for your product that you're exporting, and you look at what they are, this electrical machinery, sound equipment, TV equipment is actually semiconductors, you'll find in there. Industrial machinery, including computers, there may be semiconductor equipment in there. Some of these categories go up when Intel is filling out a plant in Vietnam or somewhere overseas, and they're developing a lot of equipment here, which they ship over. We imagine, because we don't know exactly if you look at the statistics. Cereals would be grains, third down. Columbia River is probably the biggest grain exporting port on the West Coast, probably the biggest exporting port from the US. Most of that grain is going to Asia, Japan, Korea, China, soft wheat for making noodles. Vehicles and parts, Freightliner is a big part of that, perhaps. I say perhaps because you look at the statistics, they won't tell you the companies. That's proprietary information, but we can take a guess at who that is. Again, optic, photo, medic, and surgical instruments, there's a lot mixed in there. There's a company that makes implants for broken bones in the arm in Hillsborough, and they'll export a lot of their titanium parts worldwide. Components for medical instruments. Tektronix, still a big exporter from the area. Quite a few we'll get into. But then you get into the fertilizers, oil seeds, wood and wood products. Not as much as there used to be, wood and wood products. A lot of logs going to China from private forestry lands, and China is using that for sometimes just for concrete forms when they're building quickly. Aircraft, precision cast products in Tualatin, actually over in Clackamas area, big exporter of components around the world. And steel, still some steel. Looking at the export markets, this is something that could be useful to you, but you have to take it with a grain of salt, thinking that you're talking about semiconductors, you're talking about wood products, wheat, and other products like that. China makes sense, right? Canada makes sense. Malaysia? Why Malaysia? I think that there's a packaging and testing plant for semiconductor companies, and not just Intel in this case, in Malaysia. Same thing with Costa Rica's not on this list, but up until a couple of years ago, Costa Rica would have been on this list for the same reason. Semiconductors in the past may have been exported directly from Oregon to Japan, but now they'll go to a packaging and testing plant somewhere else, and that Japanese laptop might be made in China now rather than in Japan. So these kind of export statistics that we have don't tell the whole story about where the best market for you might be. And that's something we can help you think about, or I could tell you that I have my students, I also teach global business at some of the local business schools, develop a model for themselves about what should be the top export market for your product. And it could be as simple as population, GDP, growth in GDP, but what is it that's specific about your product? If it's a business-to-business product, maybe it's the country that has the type of customer that would buy your product, a component in some other type of product. So you build that model, and then you grab some quick statistics, and I recommend that you do your own top 10 list of markets you should be going after, rather than the ones who necessarily come to you. And I'll just dive into a little bit of detail about who we are. We have actually 5 global trade specialists now. We just hired Amanda Welker over from the Oregon Department of Agriculture, who's our team leader now. But we have Alexa Byers, who deals with transportation equipment, consumer goods, defense. We're organized by sector rather than by geography. Food, agricultural processing, the part that ag doesn't do, business services. She also did, consumer products is a big thing. High technology, other high technology, electronics, advanced materials, IT, medical products, metals. Dana Shannon, he is doing sporting goods and apparel, which is a big export from Oregon. Nike's not exporting a lot, as I said, but other smaller companies are manufacturing and exporting from here. Wood products, logistics distribution. Sanan Setbun Sarng, who's ethnic Chinese, originally from Thailand, is doing clean tech, renewable energy, green building, exporting services. And what do we do? How could we help you? We have our office in Portland in the World Trade Center, and we do a lot of one-on-one counseling with companies on export strategy, a lot of just answering questions that come up, ad hoc questions. Where do I go to find out more information about regulations in this country? Someone contacted us, how do we know if they're good or not? We've had cases of fraud from different countries, from China. A large company too, actually, was taken in. And we know we can do a lot for you, but we know a lot about all the different resources that are available to you in the US, the federal government level, but also in other countries. If you're high tech, if you're business to business, if you're software, if you want to really go after the Japan market or the European market, you probably want to have an office there at some point. Start out with partners or distributors, but you probably want to have an office at some point to take full advantage of that, especially if your product requires a lot of touch, a lot of support, pre-sales or post-sales, both. And in that case, the good news is I do export promotion. There are other people in my department, and we also do a little bit of inbound investment promotion, trying to get other companies to set up offices in Oregon. And other countries do that too. They promote their own exports, and they try to promote inbound investments. And if you want to set up an office in Japan or in Germany, then the German government or the Japanese government have resources to help you, because they want to see you go there and hire people in their country as well. And it's good to take advantage of those services. We helped out Elemental Technologies when they were getting started in Hong Kong and Europe. They pretty much did it on their own. But we have overseas offices. We have an office in Tokyo with 3 state employees. We have reps in other countries, and I think I have another slide on that. But they can help you with some quick questions, with distributor searches, help you out with setting up for trade shows, events over there. And that leads on to the next thing. We have grants, we have money, which seems to get a lot of people's attention. And mostly that's used for exhibiting at a trade show. And trade shows may or may not be a good marketing channel for your company or product. They do tend to get used a bit more overseas than they do in the US. And of course, it's very industry specific. So in the US, we used to have a huge trade show, Comdex, in Las Vegas. It's gone now. Don't do that. But we still have the CES, the Consumer Electronics Show. So for consumer electronics products, trade shows are still a big deal. And that's true overseas as well. Germany still has CeBIT, which is software trade show, which is well down from its peak in attendance in the probably late 1990s, early 2000s, but they're still going strong. But if you're selling software to the architectural sector or the medical sector, Medical sector, you may go and promote your product at Medica in Dusseldorf, one of the largest trade shows. Slide for that. So this grant program can reimburse you half of your costs for a trade show or going on a trade mission or some other activities like internationalizing your website, localizing it, if you're translating parts of it. You could apply for a grant to get up to 50% of those eligible expenses, up to $5,000 per grant. You could get 4 grants per year. Has to be a small company. Usually that means less than 500 employees, but the Small Business Administration has different rules depending on the type of company. For software businesses, it's actually based on revenue. But if you're under 100 employees, your revenue is also probably within that within that range. Good standing with the government means that you're not accused of frauding the government. You paid your taxes. They'll check that, or you actually just self-certify as passing that. We like it to be an Oregon company, so at least 75% of your employees in Oregon.
And actually headquartered.
Headquartered, yeah. And for companies that are headquartered, that we've been flexible in the past. Company that they have their main presence in Oregon, they may have presence elsewhere, but they may be freelancers or they may be individual employees all over the world, but their main location is definitely in Oregon. We'll just work that out. Significant value added in Oregon. So if the product is totally developed overseas, totally manufactured overseas, and you're just putting your name on it and selling it, probably wouldn't qualify. But if it's manufactured overseas, and we see this a lot in apparel, but it's designed here, and you're employing a lot of people here, we'll consider that significant value added. So I mentioned it could be a trade show booth or trade mission. People say, well, I want to go over and I just want to walk the show. And well, that's fine, but we won't be able to get a grant for that. And I've done it before, where I've gone to a trade show, didn't have a booth, and I've often was as effective doing that as I was having a booth. And we'd like to be able to offer the grant for that, but there's just no way to audit it and to check to see if people are promoting it. Doesn't mean if you have a booth that you're doing a good job marketing your product either, but you have some skin in the game and you're more likely there than not at the trade show. So there's a trade show rental booth or the trade mission fee, your hotel and per diem for one person. Those are eligible expenses. And all of those are reimbursed at the rate of 50%. Airfare credit, if it's overseas airfare, what that means, up to $1,000 we match 50%. If it's over $1,000, it's $500, so we don't go over the $500. And that gets around the thing of business class. If you want to fly business class, that's fine, but we're not going to pay for half of it in that case. And there's also been fraud I heard about in the agriculture area where someone would buy an expensive ticket and put in that receipt and then trade in the ticket for a cheaper one before they went and pocketed the difference. Anyway, export training, there are opportunities of that. Export training offered by the federal government, that could be a grant, reimbursable activity. U.S. Department of Commerce has something called Gold Key Service, which is a business matchmaking service. You could do that together with a trade show or just go over and do something like that, where you provide them information on your company, what kind of partners you're looking for in country or customers, and then you fly over there and they'll have meetings set up for you one after the other. Just
out of curiosity, do you happen to be familiar with any Oregon success stories there? Companies
in the Gold Key?
Yeah, that have used that. And
yeah, not off the top of my head, but
yeah, there have been some that did take advantage.
And your mileage may vary. The lesson is, though, and the U.S. Department of Commerce office down the hall from us in the World Trade Center, they'll be pretty straightforward that Germany, the office is pretty good. China, they've got pretty good people there. And other places, not so good. They've been cutting back, the number of people overseas for budget reasons. So if they've got a good staff there who've been around for a while, they can set up some good meetings for you. The more esoteric your product is, I think they're going to be less effective because these are generalists you're dealing with, and you could give them good guidance. Also, sometimes people don't give them enough time. There's a cutoff, but you should give them at least a few months and be in contact with them about the kind of people you want to meet. So you go to our website, www.oregonforbiz.com, and search on grant. And you could find out information. There's very straightforward rules. There's a bit of documentation, but it's well worth it in terms of getting that grant. We've worked with people on export finance, and there's something called the Export-Import Bank of the U.S., which sounds like it's something for Boeing, but actually they're on the hook from Congress to work more with small companies. It has to be a hardware product, though, in this case for most of their products, but not all of them.
Hardware as in physical, like apparel
rather than a service. Yeah, but they have a number of different products, and one of them is working capital. So startups, I don't think about it so much, but there's a company down near Salem, Independence, that makes really mobile dental clinics or hospital clinics. So they'll buy a Winnebago, actually a chassis from Ford, and they'll build their dental clinic on this and ship that overseas. Well, they often won't get paid until they ship. So you have to buy the chassis from Ford, and since this is a small company, Ford is a big company, Ford isn't going to extend them much credit. So you can apply for working capital, and oftentimes you can do that fine with U.S. customers, but when you start working overseas, your banker may say, we're not so sure you're going to get paid, or maybe we are, but we don't have the staff in our small local bank to actually check on that. But if you have the guarantee from Exim Bank, and they'll do work for you, and they may charge a little bit of money for that, but you can build that into your price, then you can get that loan for working capital. They also provide export credit insurance. I mentioned a lot of people shipping overseas, they want to deal with cash in advance because what if they don't pay you? How do you get your money back? You're going to fly over there? You're going to rely on their legal system to get the money for you? And generally it does work out, but it can take a long time. It could be expensive. But you can set up to have export credit insurance. You have a number of different partners in different countries overseas that all be on your insurance policy, and the government would pay you in case of non-payment on the other side. You may have the greatest partner in the world who's been very reliable, but if they get into trouble, they may stop paying you, and you can lose out that way. So the insurance is a good thing to have. Some of the other things are for larger customers where they're buying something very large. The government can fund your buyer, in that case overseas, to purchase the product.
Are there any significant points of differentiation between your export financing utilizing the Exim Bank versus the private sector?
No, you should look at the private sector as well. And there are insurance products too in the private sector. If you go to a good broker, oftentimes they can show you some private products, and they also will work with Exim Bank. And the Small Business Administration also has some loan guarantee programs. So you can compare all of those together and just look and see which is the best price if you're doing that.
So if you're to line things up,
yeah.
Is the private sector more competitive, comparable?
Or does it depend?
That's always the fallback answer. I understand that.
For larger companies who can have any insurance they want, if they're going to difficult countries, then Exim Bank probably would give them a better deal rather than private sector, because a private sector company doesn't want to take that risk. For smaller companies, it's often the problem of getting someone willing to pay attention to you and charge you a reasonable rate, because you're not giving them enough business volume to really make it worth their while. And in that case, Exim Bank, the Small Business Administration, are required, their government entities, they're self-funded. Well, Exim Bank is self-funded anyway. They get more in revenue back than they pay out. But they're required to work with smaller companies. Even then, sometimes you'll find out it's not quite small enough. It's like when you're going to VCs for money and you have a small company, sometimes I only want this much. And they say, well, we feel better if you have this much. And sometimes it's the bank that causes that. How much money will they be making on the deal? And it may not be worth their while to look at that. But we're always working with Ex-Im Bank, bringing them in here, and they're working with banks, trying to get more banks signed up, and we can help you through that process, steer you the right way, and talk to people who can give you more information on that. So I talked about our offices. We have an office in Tokyo, Japan. We have a contractor in Korea that Mr. Sean Kim, his father has been in that office working for us for a while. Have an office in China. Their contract is coming up at the end of June, but we will either continue with them or have a new rep. In Europe, the contract's currently lapsed, but we'll have another contractor in Europe pretty soon. And as I said, these are people with feet on the street that can help you out. U.S. Department of Commerce has many more people overseas, and we can help connect you with them. We have a letter of, actually a memo of understanding with Saudi Arabia, the U.S. Saudi Arabia Business Council based in Washington, D.C. They're a business membership organization, and of course they want members, but they'll give you at least 1 hour of consultation if you're looking at Saudi Arabia as a business location, and it is a pretty good business location. Better when the prices of oil are up, but still they're trying to diversify their economy, and they do have enough money to do that, and they're having growing pains and need a lot of more medical clinics, more universities, and everything that goes along with that. So I talked a little bit about the kind of trade shows that might be interesting. Japan IT Week, and it's very common, under one umbrella you have many different small trade shows under that. So there's a cloud section, there's a mobile section, there's embedded devices or embedded software for machines, because Japan is still a place that still manufactures a lot of equipment, smart machines and smart equipment. Internet of Things, there'll be a section for that at Japan IT Week. Medica, I mentioned before, that's actually the largest medical hospital product show in the world every year in Dusseldorf. They tend to sell out their booths pretty early in the year, but through the U.S. Department of Commerce, you can get not a booth space, they do it differently. They have an office space on the show floor, and they help set up appointments for you. And in any case, whether you have a booth or not, to be effective at a trade show, you should never go there just expect people to walk by. You use that as your office away from where you are. And if you go to a show like Medica, you'll find there are people there from all over the world, South America, Asia, everywhere. And a lot of your partners in other countries will be coming there as well. So it can be really efficient to go there and meet with all of your partners around the world. Do that. And the CEO, Corporate Executive Office Program of the U.S. Department of Commerce, that they do at Medica, you could sign up as late as middle of summer and get a spot on there for a pretty reasonable cost. And that cost would be eligible for the grants that I mentioned earlier, up to 50% reimbursed to you, up to $5,000 for that. The BET show, that's educational technology. So if you're going after the educational sector, that show in London is probably the biggest one outside the US. I mentioned CBIT earlier because it's a software show. But software companies, you don't often, sometimes you want to go to a software show if you're making software for other software makers. But if you're making software for construction companies, like, what's the company over across the river, Biomzy? Jay Halliday just sold it recently.
Oh,
Viewpoint.
Yeah, for the construction.
Yeah, Viewpoint construction software.
Yeah. Quick poll. What? See, we have sort of a specialty apparel, I guess, or I don't know. How do you describe your market? What?
It's really a wellness product.
A wellness product.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's registered as a medical device, but we consider it a wellness product.
And your market apparel. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So and these are all techie shows. Are there any examples of other
Apparel, there's plenty. And
but for medical device, is Medica something that might relate to what you do?
Yeah, because we are making a shift from just nursing moms to breast cancer and pelvic cramps. So Medica could be a good spot for us.
uh-huh. Have we dealt with you before?
No.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't think so.
There's another. No, there's another company we worked for in Oregon that had breast pump type of product.
Oh, okay. Great.
So and in that case, Medica may be a good show, but in the medical area, there's lots of specialty shows, lots of small ones, and it's often more effective to go, depending on the type of the product, it may be more effective to go to one of those specialty shows. And sometimes you get a speaking slot at one of those. Sometimes you pay for a speaking slot, and if you do that, you can consider that a booth as well overseas. But there's plenty of sites on the web now that'll list every trade show in the world and let you search on industry, country, a lot of different ways to find out where they are. And we can give you some advice on those, or our offices can tell you, well, how is this show? We also allow, I put a lot of tech things in here. We also allow domestic shows. We don't want to promote that. Not every domestic shows. The U.S. Department of Commerce lists about 12 to 15 shows. That's part of what they call the International Buyers Program. And we consider that kind of an honorary international trade show. And they bring in buyers from overseas, and they'll have special events to meet where you can meet up with people. And those CES, and the Consumer Electronics Show, is one of those. NRA is one, which is nothing to do with guns. That's National Restaurant Association. So I don't know about apparel, if there's anything there. We did something with the high-tech sector, in case there's someone online. We have Heather Stafford is our assistant director within Business Oregon for innovation side of things. And that's just not just tech, but we did go to this tech summit tech event called Web Summit in Dublin last fall. And it's kind of like South by Southwest, but for Europe. I think they're going to be in Portugal next time. It's been in Ireland for a number of years. But it was huge. It was huge. And Michael Dell was there speaking in the hall. And Oregon had a booth there where we tried to attract investors. That's why we were there, but also supporting Skip Newberry from TAO was there, Nitin Rai from Thai Oregon, Mark Sussman, who's with Willamette Week, but also does TechFest Northwest, Skip Rung of Onami, a company called Notion, or Uncork Studios and Mobile RQ. They're all there for different reasons, sometimes looking for talent, sometimes looking for partners overseas, just trying to see what was going on, what other startups are doing in different part of the year. Pretty much people were busy nonstop at the event and also at the parties and get-togethers for VCs and that they had going on during the whole week. And that's pretty much it for the formal part of the presentation. My contact information is there. Any more questions I can address?
Yeah, I'll see if I can switch back to the camera, and we'll bring up the Q&A panel too, so the people online can try. But why don't we start here locally, see if there are any questions.
Are you doing anything overseas yet? Have you started?
Just tiny stuff. I picked up just a couple businesses that I just shipped directly to. At one of the biggest trade shows, the ABC Expo, which is all baby and child. So that was our first really big trade show. Picked up a lot of. There was a lot of international distributors that were interested in but we were not scalable at that time. So. But yeah, just a few. But my preference is to find a distributor in a couple different countries first, and then.
Yeah, there's a lot a distributor can do for you. If you're doing directly, that's That's fine. Could work out very well. A lot of consumer products, if you're selling your product online already or through Amazon or one of the online malls, you can do that internationally as well. Of course, anyone can order from Amazon internationally. But in countries like China, Korea, Japan, if most of the consumers are not that comfortable with English, and they're not that comfortable about putting their credit card information, or in China, it's problematic to use a credit card to buy things from overseas so often. So there are businesses that have grown up where you have people from China, Korea, and Japan who are setting up warehouses, often in Oregon, where there's no sales tax here, and they provide the face to the consumer in Asia, order the product, then they order it here, have it drop shipped, consolidate the shipment, so they're shipping on a pallet overseas and get the shipping costs down, but they're individually wrapped for the consumer so that it goes through customs much more efficiently. It's really very interesting, and they also have the software to set it up so that they have shopping carts, and the shopping cart files, so the order goes through automatically, but also the shipping, the logistics on the other side are also very efficient. And it's a good way if you're selling consumer products to reach those markets directly. But if you're a product that needs support, pre-sales or post-sales, and you're not ready to set up an office in that country, you can do it through a partner. And the only thing you have to think about, though, is you got to give them a share of your sale. And you can do that by raising the price if you can. It depends on the competitive situation in that market. Or if you can't, then it's discount, and you have to see whether you're covering your costs on this side. And when you're writing up a contract with your partner, and you should have a contract, of course, and the terms, the length of time for the contract, the period, should be limited in scope. Unless it's a consumer product or apparel, they may want a longer contract because they're doing a lot of upfront marketing for you and they want to get that paid back. And that's fine too, as long as you have milestones in the contract, where you could revisit the contract if they're not meeting milestones. So there's a lot in contract that we can talk about if we had more time, or we can talk individually. But duties of the distributor and duties of the manufacturer, are you going to be providing them with secondary support? Are you going to be providing them with samples? Are you going to provide them with training? Do they fly? Does the distributor send people over for training, or do you send people over there to train their people? And that can be a very big thing.
We have one question so far online. Just which next opportunity for a booth at an international trade show?
To share a booth. Oh, that's interesting.
Or to participate in an Oregon booth.
Yeah. So there's trade shows going on all the time, and Oregon does take part in booths where we have an Oregon booth, like I showed there at Web Summit. Would probably in the tech area like that, I was kind of hoping that we would do it in Ireland again, because Web Summit went to Portugal. We weren't sure we wanted to go to Portugal to follow them, and there was going to be somebody taking Web Summit's place in Oregon. I mean, in Ireland, but it sounds like it's more for government to government. The event that they're planning there in Cork is going to be about how to set up incubators and their experiences with doing that and how that relates to economic development. It's not quite like the SYSW that Web Summit was. So they'll be having that in Lisbon. But we have booths. We'll have 10 trade shows. We probably have about 3 or 4 left until next end of September, and then about 10 from October to September, which is a federal year. And it's spread out in the different sectors. So we have a couple one in outdoors. So the big show in Germany for outdoor goods. Could be apparel, but outdoor apparel. Another show for bicycles. There's a lot of going in and people doing things for bicycles in Oregon. And so we go to the bicycle show in Germany. There's a pop-up shop coming up in Tokyo. This is the 3rd year that Portland Development Commission has been doing that, and we support them with some direct funds as well as allow companies to use grants. And that's going to be athletic and outdoor, but sometimes that's a little bit broader than that. So they have a pop-up shop in Tokyo where buyers come in, but also consumers come in, and it's generally the cool Portland goods. There's a company in Beaverton that makes Seamus, that makes covers for golf clubs that look like Pendleton blankets with the tartan design, and so they're selling in Japan, and they were at the pop-up shop. But also Keen Shoes was there as well. I could send you a list of the events, but some related in the food and beverage area. Some are in aircraft or aerospace area. I'm going to go to Arab Health if we can get a booth there in winter of 2017 coming up. And there's an environmental show in Mexico in September in Mexico City that has to do with clean tech, architecture, environmental, alternative energy. That's coming up.
It's quite a range.
Quite a range. We cover pretty much any industry, but in terms of the number of shows that we have an Oregon booth at, it's a subset of those, or a wide range.
Any other questions here? What are your burning issues around international? What are you worried about? Or just sort of starting to look into it?
A lot of it was regulations as well, so.
Yeah, with medical products,
Yeah,
that's a big.
that was my, we've just tested new materials for US and Canada, but I don't know anything beyond, site so.
Is there a particular market you're eyeing as what you think might be the next?
Well, China is one that we've gotten a lot of interest in China, Europe, Germany. We're trying to secure a utility patent in Canada, so it makes it easy for us to do it there, and we've submitted European patents. But China seems to have been the big interest lately.
So you mentioned intellectual property, which is a good thing to bring up as well, especially when you're talking about China and some other markets. That thing I talked about where you can drop ship or sell things online directly, you want to make sure at least you have your trademarks registered in the countries that you want to sell to in the future, because you may find that someone's registered your trademark in China, and there's nothing to stop them from doing that. It's first to file. So it's a good, same like your web URL. You want to get those where you're going to be selling and protect that property. If you have a patent in the US on your product, there's nothing to stop someone in another country from copying your product and selling it. You don't have a patent there. Now, if they try to sell it back in the US, then you can file a complaint and the US government can get involved in helping you out. You might have to push a little bit in that case. If someone's violating if you do have a patent in China or another country, and someone's violating it, that's a private right. You have to go over there and sue on your dime, right? And you may not have the resources to do that. So it's good to have the patent. It's expensive to get a worldwide patent, but it's easier and better to do it all at once in the beginning than not. There are a lot of people who work without patents. They just try to keep ahead of, their value is in their connection with the customer and new products. And that can't be copied so easily in a lot of cases. But if your product is copied and it's copied poorly, that's a big problem too. That you may get a bad rep for your product or the way that you approach something because it was done poorly by someone else. But China in general, because of the rule of law, it's better. There's been a lot of pressure from the US. And there's a lot of people aggressive who want to start businesses there. It doesn't cost them a lot to start a business. And the government itself isn't always, of China, isn't always that severe and that strict in clamping down on possible abuses there. So for that reason, in a lot of cases, China might be your biggest market. But I tell people if you're not in Canada, maybe you could look at Canada first, and the UK, and some of the other markets. Why is there so much news and press about China? Because everyone who's doing global business now, well, China was the next frontier. It is a growing market, but there are a lot of other markets out there that are a lot easier. And in terms of revenue, how many Chinese customers do you need in order to fill up your production flow? So prioritize and consider risk, intellectual property, safety as some of the factors when you're prioritizing your markets overseas. Not just the potential, but there's also the potential risk involved in your products. In terms of materials testing, it's kind of true that there's a joke that the Italians used to tell, but well, in the interest of time, we'll just say that in the US, any material is permitted unless it's forbidden. So you can use any product, any material in your product, and as long as it hasn't been found to be toxic, that's fine. In Europe, you can't use a material unless it's been approved. It's on the safe list. So it's a lot more strict there.
Different standard of safety.
Another regulatory issue is end of life issues. You have an electronic product and they have the waste electronics. So you have to make sure that you have someone there who's willing to take the product at the end of its life back. Another thing in the medical area is they often need a registrar in the country. So what if there's an adverse event with your product in the foreign country? They don't want to have to contact someone in another country. They want someone in the hook in that country. That doesn't mean you need an office there or your own person. You can hire a company. There are companies in those markets who do that for you, but you will have to pay them a fee.
So another thing you have to watch out for is like other safety-related things, like even with apparel, right? There are different types of safety regulations and certifications and testing and so forth.
Right, fireproof or the chemicals you may use to keep it fireproof.
I think we had another question that popped up there about whether doing something, let's see, when you do some charitable effort and relating that to promoting tourism, sort of almost an Oregon branding thing. I think any experience with Oregon companies trying to get international interest from the other things the company does that are more charitable? Or
there is tourism in general I could talk about. There's another organization in the state that does a better job than we do, more directly. That's Travel Oregon, and they'll work with local people who are in the tourist business, but also organizations, cities, towns, to help market their assets internationally. And so reading your question, some of it may be things that have to be done in Oregon in order to make it more attractive for international visitors. Well, you're kind of skirting the area. Some of those things could be done through locally first in order to do that. And then once you've got it, you got your asset all lined up, then you can look at Travel Oregon and help you promote that. They go to travel shows around the world, just like trade shows. And we have not allowed public entities to use our grants. But if a private entity applied for the grant and they meet all of the qualifications and they're bringing people from overseas here that should qualify, although we've got to look at how we track that, what kind of results you get back. But if you're going to a trade show where there are travel arrangers or travel agents there and brokers, and you're collecting their cards, then those are leads. And so we could consider that a result going overseas.
All right. Are we running out of questions? I think we're running out of questions.
I could touch on available market research and not so much on the ease to penetrate a new market on the rules and regulation side, but on the demographic side. What might be helpful as far as discovery, prioritizing international markets for you, like a top 10 list, know that top 10, this is the first 3 that we're going to roll out based on there's not just the rules and regulations, but the demographics, and maybe having a similar target market here that would be elsewhere.
Yeah.
What might be helpful for her from a market research standpoint?
Mm-hmm. Well, I have my students, when I have students go through international business class, look at every country with a few statistics that are easy to collect on every country, and like population. And I tell them, because they're students, not to use Wikipedia, but you can use Wikipedia. You can look and see in Wikipedia where they got that source of information. Often for the list of countries with demographics, they have 3 lists, one from the World Bank, another from the CIA, another from another organization, and they're all reputable. So you can easily get the demographic information, also growth of markets, that kind of information, even some things that are more specific to your product. Somebody wanted to do a surfboard, so I said, well, look at, in terms of weather, where the country is, but also coastline, miles of coastline with waves, and often you can get the miles of coastline for any country, and you can focus that way. So I'd give that as an example. You could probably think of something for your own industry. And then how do you collect more industry-specific information? Sometimes through trade organizations. Pharma is an industry trade association for the pharmaceutical industry. There's another industry association for medical products. There may be something in the childcare area. You could, and then if you're ready to dive down, so that I have them look at every country with some simple statistics and then filter it down to about 30 or so, and then use another where it's a little bit harder to get the information, to filter that down to a top 10, and then prioritize them in priority order. And then with the top 10, you can start contacting people at the U.S. Department of Commerce overseas. You can go to the office, their office, our office, or their office next to us, the World Trade Center in Portland, to talk to the USIAC, the U.S. Export Assistance Center there, and they can connect you with their overseas people in each country. Or you can go directly on the web, and I think it's www.trade.gov, or it might be export.gov. Both of those used to work. One of them may not. Export.gov or trade.gov / the name of the country. So you go / China, it'll take you to the website at the U.S. Embassy in China for the commercial service. And in that website, they may have something, if you're in China, and it might be in Chinese, or if you're in the U.S. looking to export, so go to the U.S. side, and then contact us. We'll give you the name of all of their specialists there, and often they're divided by industry. So you'd look for the one in the medical products area who's dealing with that. They'll have their telephone number, their email address, call them up, look at the time zone difference to find out what time it is there, or send them an email and ask them your questions. And they'll provide you with information.
And with that, we probably ought to wrap up because it's like a minute afternoon. I think the bottom line to advice is if you're going to go international, call up Tom. And
That's a short one.
And get the
I can direct you.
Yeah, get the info on all the opportunities. Great. Well, thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you, Steve. For the opportunity.
We'll go ahead and sign off here online, and thanks, folks out there, for listening.